Plus, Finance Minister Tito Mboweni will deliver his budget speech a few days from now. Revenue collection is low with a huge public wage bill. Professor Sharon Smulders, Tax Advocacy Project Director at the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants, joins us now to discuss the various issues that are at play here ahead of this announcement. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Now, on Wednesday next week, we will be hearing from the Finance Minister Tito Mboweni at around 2 p.m.
Correct.
And a lot of experts and commentators are saying that this is going to be a really tough budget. In fact, the toughest in decades. What are your comments around that?
No, for sure. Look, we're sitting with a deficit of about 306 billion rand. So basically, we either have to reduce income by 306 billion or reduce expenditure by increase revenue by 306 billion or reduce expenditure by 306 billion just to break even. So the problem that we have is that we have so much debt that we have to pay back, and the debt is just increasing rapidly. We're looking at almost 70% over the next 3 years as a percentage of GDP, which is really frightening. So it's not just the debt, it's the interest on the debt that we have to now fund out of our revenue, and the revenue is the problem. The revenue we're expecting, according to the medium-term budget speech, they said about 56 billion rand, 56 billion rand shortfall, and the predictions are it's actually going to be more than that, sitting between 63 billion rand shortfall.
And where will this money come from?
Well, that's the question. You've got to increase taxes if you want the additional revenue. How do we do that? Do we increase VAT? If it goes up by 1%, the estimates will be between 15 to 20 billion rand additional revenue. That's not enough to cover the shortfall. It's the easiest and quickest way to do it. So will it happen? Most probably. Scary, but with political will behind it, hasn't been there, but there is no other place to go. We've had increases over the last few years in capital gains tax, we've had the new carbon tax, the sugar tax, the VAT rate increase, as we said in 2018. So there's not many other places that you can go. There has been talk of a wealth tax, but again, we must bear in mind that we have got estate duty, we've got donations tax, we've got capital gains tax. So taxing the wealthy is going to be quite problematic in South Africa as well, because there are such a small number of taxpayers too.
Mm-hmm. You really speak to a difficult balancing force for the finance minister ahead of this budget speech. On the one hand, I mean, you mentioned VAT, which could be good for the economy, but there are repercussions for the poor who could be hardest hit. Where does this place them?
Yeah, look, it's very difficult. What they can do, one of the options is that they can zero rate more items, so the items that the poor would generally use. So it's not so regressive, but that makes it very complex. And that comes to another point, is that the whole foreign direct investment and complexity of doing business in South Africa is not where it used to be. It's very difficult, it's complex, there's no policy certainty, and that also affects foreign direct investment coming into the country, which we desperately need.
And, Treasury also launched the sugar tax. In terms of the gains that it's made, have we seen any significance?
Yes, well, it has been bringing in income, actually more than actually predicted. So it is definitely bringing in additional income, but again, not enough to break this deficit that we're sitting in.
And let's just go back to the wealth tax conversation that we're talking about now, with the minister making gains there. In terms of just assessing it and weighing out the pros and cons, where are we looking?
Well, at the moment, there's two options. You can either increase the tax rates, but at the moment, if we look at our tax rates, we're pretty high compared to the rest of the world. So we would be chasing the rich away. If we take an example, our tax bracket, the highest tax bracket, kicks in at 1.5 million rand. If we compare that to the UK, that would only be paid by somebody earning 2.9 million rand. So it would force the rich away, because they are mobile. So it either would tell them, okay, I'm not going to pay and stop working, I'll earn less and pay less, or I'll start evading tax, and that's where the whole trust issue comes in. If there's no trust, they are going to go to evasion, or they'll just get up and leave because they are mobile. So that is concerning for us, because we don't have many wealthy people in South Africa at the moment. There is money, but taxing it might have, unfortunately, the opposite effect.
And just looking at the zero-rated food list that you mentioned a short while ago, and as well as the impact that it will have on poorer households, could that then lead to us looking at then an increase in social grant, because, the impacts will be felt?
No, for sure. Look, we're sitting with social grants between about 11 to 12% of our GDP is going to, of our revenue is going to social grants. 18 million people on social grants. That money has to come from somewhere, and at the moment it's coming from taxpayers. But the taxpayers are under heavy pressure, and if we do increase the VAT, that money is going to have to go to them, as it's getting problematic, and it's not sustainable in the long run, and we need to work on changing that.
What about the factors that are really influential, looking at the global economy in efforts to find a way for, the South African economy to thrive, and factors like the quality of governance, the political stability, and all of those elements? How do they really, have an impact on what we hear when the finance minister takes to the podium?
It's huge. If we just take crime, the effect of crime on tourism, which should be one of our greatest sectors in the economy, it's struggling. And that comes to policy certainty. We cannot get certainty of where we are going. We don't have clear directions. We don't have plans in place. And that brings me back to accountability. There's no accountability at this stage. The government or Parliament is responsible for ensuring that we have a proper budget, and it's National Treasury's role to ensure that the departments stick to those budgets. But what we're seeing is that certain departments are getting more and more budget, yet they're not sticking to the budget. An example in case is, for instance, water and sanitation. Their budget increased from 15.5 billion to 16.4 billion, yet they've got 1.7 billion rand in irregular expenditure, and they only met 13% of their targets. So why is that department getting more money when they're not doing what they're meant to be doing? So it comes back to service delivery and holding people accountable, and that is National Treasury's role, but ultimately Parliament has to start putting their foot down and saying we can't do this. We need to get foreign direct investment, we need to have policy certainty, and we need to ensure that doing business in South Africa is easy. And I know the presidency has directed the DTI and Invest SA to try and improve doing business in South Africa, because it's critical. We need it. We need to make things simpler. And I think this is where the government's got to, at some stage, learn to give to get. We've got to reduce certain things, fix certain things before we're going to get more money coming in that will help our population.
Yeah, and what about the dire situations that our SOEs find themselves in? ESCOM, SAA.
Yeah.
What is
Again, it comes back to, how did National Treasury let this happen? How did this get past their watch? They cannot be spending these things. How did we approve these loans when their balance sheets don't show that they actually should be funded further? So it again comes back to, we have to ensure that there is accountability and that people stick to their budgets where the budgets have been allocated to them, and that there's no wasteful expenditure, fruitless expenditure, etc. And that's easiest places to start. Is stop those things. We'll save at least 4.5 billion rand in irregular expenditure. That's the amount. That's 62 billion is irregular expenditure. 4.5 billion in wasteful and fruitless expenditure of the last 5 years. So those are small numbers, but still, we've got to start somewhere, and those are easy places to start.
Absolutely. And in terms of adding to the solutions, the Sovereign Wealth Fund,
Yes.
Where will that money come from?
Good question. And that's something that I think the Minister will have to answer at the budget next week, because everybody's asking that question, because we've still got to fund national health insurance. That's apparently still on the cards. Where is that money coming from? I don't know at this stage. It has to come from tax revenue, otherwise I'm not sure.
Thank you so much. Let's leave it there. Of course, all eyes will be on Wednesday, 2 p.m. next week, as Finance Minister Tito Mboweni will be delivering the budget speech. Of course, I was speaking there to Professor Sharon Smulders.